Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. Y'all must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the numbers review. Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. You must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the ones and twos.
Welcome to the second round of the playoffs. For the first time in what feels like forever, and only the second time ever, you, Toronto Raptor fan, are cheering for a team in the second round of the playoffs. Welcome also to the Raptors Weekly Extra Podcast, not really coming at you in its normal spot because the Raptors made the second round of the playoffs, and that kind of changes the schedule on things. I'm your host, Blake Murphy. I'm joined by William Liu. William Liu, the Raptors made the second round of the playoffs. They are in the second round of the playoffs.
How sweet it is. It honestly, it doesn't even matter how ugly, how hard it was to get here. This is it. It almost feels like we won the championship, honestly. Last night on Twitter, just seeing everyone react, it was a bit like we won the championship. And as sad as that sounds, there was so many stakes riding on the line for just one game. And they did it, man. They persevered. They managed to hang on. The Pacers made a whole bunch of errors down the stretch. Not as many as the Raptors, but still. And, yeah, man, holy crap. We are actually in the second round.
Yeah, the Raptors had to make it nerve-wracking, letting a 14-point lead whittled away to 3. And then Paul George finally, after 7 games and 42 minutes a game of carrying a huge offensive load and of locking down, for the most part, DeMar DeRozan, a 20-point-a-game scoring all-star, George was tired for one possession. He took one possession off, basically, the entire series, and it was a turnover when the Pacers were down 3 with the ball with under a minute to go. And that was all the Raptors needed. They gave Indiana a little bit of space, a little bit of an opening, and then they just needed that one break, and they shut it down from there. They won by 5. They won a 7-game series for the first time in franchise history. You mentioned that it felt like winning the title. It shouldn't feel like that, obviously, and I wouldn't be surprised if other fan bases scoff a little bit at how the Raptors fan base reacted to that win. But it's really important. This franchise has been around for 21 seasons now, and this was the best regular season they've ever had, and it's now tied for the furthest they've ever gone in the playoffs. And I think you can pretty confidently, unless they get swept here, pretty confidently call this the best iteration of a Raptors team that they've had. And the first round was not encouraging in terms of what might come in this round, and it was at times frustrating and disappointing, and it's still, winning that one game, that 5-point swing in Game 7, maybe shouldn't change the analysis of what's here and where it's going, but the story can really be rewritten in greater detail over this second round series. And the important thing is that the Raptors have now shown growth. They've gotten over this major hump. They were tested physically and mentally in this series against Indiana in the fourth quarter of Game 7. They've gotten past that hump. This core has taken the step to the next level in both the regular season and the playoffs. And now, they're not looking at it as such, but if you're looking at it from a wide-lensed franchise growth perspective, anything from here is kind of gravy, right?
Yeah, it has the feeling of playing with house money. Like, I'm not super worried, not super anxious about the Heat, because at the end of the day, they did actually surpass that first round barrier, and like you said, man, that's not the best way to make decisions for a team just based on a 7-game series, but that's huge, man. It was like the Raptors had a curse basically upon them, and
I don't know about all that, but
I mean, kind of. The first round curse is, it was something that kind of, I don't know, at least it existed, at least in the minds of many fans. And it felt like that was going to weigh down the team, and it was going to curse the team to continuously fail, and they broke that trend, and that's huge. And now in the second round, I mean, Dwayne Casey and a lot of other players were mentioning after the game, hope this is getting the monkey off their back, and this is hopefully a sign of that they're going to play freer and looser in the second round, because, there were a lot of very, very tense moments basically throughout the entire 7-game series.
Yeah, that's what Dwayne Casey said after the game, that hopefully they play not relaxed, but a little freer from here, and maybe that's, maybe that's the case. And let's talk about it. The Toronto Raptors on Tuesday night will open their second round playoff series against the Miami Heat. The Miami Heat were a pretty good regular season team. they were also a regular season team that made a big addition late in Joe Johnson to make up for the loss of Chris Bosh, who it's so damn unfortunate that Bosh isn't going to get to play in this series. Fortunate in the sense that, I think the Heat would be pretty heavy favorites if Bosh were playing, but unfortunate in the fact that, Chris Bosh is a good dude and a good player, and, I would love to see him healthy rather than not healthy. But the Heat are dangerous, and the Heat always seem like a team that might be able to find that extra level in the playoffs when rotations tighten and when veteran experience and savvy kind of starts to win out. And they did that against the Hornets. They were down 3-2. They won the first two. It seemed like it was maybe over when Nick Batum went on the shelf for the Hornets, but the Hornets rallied back, and then the Heat, backs against the wall, got things done in a major way in games 6 and 7. Because when you have guys who have been through the ringer and you supplement them with super athletic and super effective young players with a ton of energy to kind of pick up the older guys when they hit lulls or when they don't have it, that's dangerous. The Heat are good. The Raptors won more games. The Raptors were a higher seed. The Raptors have home court advantage. But make no mistake, this is not a series that the Raptors can just walk into and be like, oh, we were better in the regular season, we're going to win this. The Heat are a different beast in the playoffs. The Heat were a different beast down the stretch. And the Heat are just that. They're a beast. Will, initial thoughts on the series before we get into specifics?
Well, my concerns for the Heat are... The second round of the playoffs, I think, concern me more because of Kyle Lowry's health. And I guess we'll talk about that.
We certainly will.
But from the Heat perspective... The scary thing with the Heat is they have so many players that are capable of going off, and that the weird thing about the Heat is that they don't all go off together at the same time. So that's why they're not just like a flying death machine. But at any given game, it could be Dwayne Wade one game going for 30. It could be Goran Dragic dropping 25. Luol Deng could catch fire. Joe Johnson is great.
Okay, let's be honest about Luol Deng. I know he's your boy, but...
Okay, Luol Deng had an amazing series, okay? And Dwayne Wade credited Luol Deng's emergence after Chris Bosh's injury as the single biggest thing that saved their season. You got even guys like Josh Richardson is very annoying.
We're going to talk Josh Richardson.
He's the new Solomon Hill, guys. Don't worry.
No, he's South Beach Norm Powell.
South Beach Norm Powell, please. Please, don't sully Norm Powell's name with the likes of Josh Richardson.
Dude, Josh Richardson, okay, we're going to talk about this more, but...
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, the Heat it's weird because there's, like, so many things you have to worry about.
Yeah, and to your Luol Deng point, he was great in the first round. We'll see if he shoots 51% on threes again. On a huge volume of threes, too.
That's true, yeah.
It's, if he's taking 6 threes a game, I don't know if you're okay with it. He's an average three-point shooter, maybe slightly below, but he's not hitting 51%, I don't think. Especially not against the Raptors' vaunted three-point defense.
Oh, baby, we will leave all corner three-point shooters open in order to help at the rim needlessly.
Yeah, the Heat, God. By the way, shot 40.6% on more than 20 three-point attempts in the first round. And Charlotte's a team that gets up to the three-point line a little better than the Raptors.
That's Warriors level, man.
That's, it's concerning. But there are, you know what, we're going to get into a lot of stuff like this. There are going to be a lot of concerning things, and there are going to be a lot of less concerning things. The Heat in the regular season shot the ball not that well from downtown, though. They were 4th last in the league at 33.6%. So part of this is tightening the rotation and finding, the guys who can shoot it and letting them shoot. But also that series may have been a little bit of an aberration in terms of how dangerous they are from outside. Although they do play, only one big at a time most of the time. So if Luol Deng is stroking it, then that's a damn good way to help space the floor around rangeless Whiteside and Dwayne Wade, who's not at all a three-point threat.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Okay, where do we even start here? And I have trouble because I brought up some of the Heat's full season stats, and I really don't feel like they're all that relevant.
Yeah, because of the Chris Bosh injury. I think
because of the Chris Bosh injury, because of the Joe Johnson addition, because of the fact that they played really a 7-man rotation with a rotating 8th or 9th man in the Hornets series. They're starting Dragic, Dwayne Wade, Joe Johnson, Luol Deng, and Hassan Whiteside, which is quite a good starting 5. They're bringing Josh Richardson and Justice Winslow off the bench, which is a ton of youthful energy and defense to bring off the bench at 2 different positions. And then they were kind of rotating game by game and entered like to see who had it between Amari Stoudemire, Josh McRoberts, and Udonis Haslem as their next big. Tyler Johnson's back, but didn't really factor in. Gerald Green was playing scrub minutes. Darrell Wright is probably going to play as many minutes as his brother in this one. You know, the Heat, in terms of analyzing, they've tightened this to a 7-man rotation with kind of a rotating 8th man. I think against the Raptors, that'll be a big. I think it'll be Stoudemire or McRoberts, maybe some Haslem to deal with Valanciunas. But they've really tightened things up, and that makes it hard to extrapolate from the regular season.
No, for sure. There's so many things. The Heat have been this, like, just a fluid situation for so long because of their injuries and because of all their additions, but they kind of have two identities, the Heat, right? They have a big type lineup that is defensively strong at the rim with Hassan Whiteside, and you got a lot of points coming in the paint between him and Dwayne Wade's drives, and Goran Dragic is a great driver as well. So you got that version, and then you got the small ball version of the Heat, which is when Hassan Whiteside goes to the bench and someone like McRoberts or Stoudemire comes in, they're able to run, they're a lot faster, they're able to swarm on defense, and they're actually somewhat surprisingly excellent on three-pointers in that lineup. So, I don't know, the Heat are a little bit like the Raptors in that they have two distinct looks.
Yeah, the Raptors have a bunch of distinct looks, which I guess helps in a series like this. I guess let's start with potential rotation stuff on the Raptors side. So we know who the Heat are going to start. We know that Richardson and Winslow are their primary guys off the bench. Are the Raptors going to stick with Patrick Patterson starting at the 4, or do you go to a 3-wing look, slide DeMar Carroll to the 4 to kind of handle the Joe Johnson thing, slot DeRozan on Luol Deng, and let Norman Powell chase Dwayne Wade around off the ball? Or do you stick with Patterson and you know, hope that he does enough offensively and adds enough on the glass, not his strength, but against a smaller team it may be, and roll with that? And remember, even though you know the team went 1-2 since the starting lineup changed, that starting 5 was actually pretty good in those 3 games and throughout the series against Indiana.
Yeah, I think you keep it the same, but I think you're a little bit more willing to go to the 3-wing lineup with one center, so long as Jonas can contain the defensive glass against Hassan Whiteside. Jonas is a good defensive rebounder, and he's just as big as Whiteside is, but Whiteside's also an absolute terror on the offensive glass. At least you can count on the rest of the Heat not really crashing because they're old. They just mostly get back on defense, so that's good. But yeah, if Jonas can control the glass, then you have a lot more leeway to downsize and match. But I think Patrick Patterson is viable. I think you could keep him on Luol Deng. It's not an issue. The biggest issue might be, can DeRozan guard Dwayne Wade, which sounds worse than it is because you can do a lot of what Paul George did to DeRozan himself, or what Dwayne Wade is surely going to do to DeRozan, which is go under screens, force him into the mid-range jumpers and stuff, and just basically if you can contain penetration, you're good.
Well, let's not get it twisted. I don't think Dwayne Wade is spending a minute on DeMar DeRozan.
That's true. Yeah.
They've got Luol Deng in the starting lineup, and they've got Winslow and Richardson off the bench.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that, but I think DeRozan could handle those guys. But just defensive from the Raptors' perspective, I don't know. I think it's important to keep enough size on the court against the Heat, just because if the Raptors do go downsize, the Heat have big wings. And that gives the Raptors a lot of trouble. And the Raptors realistically only have one big wing in DeMar Carroll. And I'm not totally sure if he can play like 35 minutes effectively every night.
Well, the nice thing is that his defensive assignments aren't going to be as chase-heavy as they were with Paul George. The Heat scores don't move quite as much. Dwayne Wade does, and Dwayne Wade is still a really good off-the-ball player, but I don't think Carroll's going to draw that assignment much. I think he's going to be the Joe Johnson guy. And Joe Johnson has been remarkably efficient for the Heat since landing there. And God damn it, do we really have to deal with Joe Johnson again? You mentioned the Raptors struggling with bigger wings. Would it be wrong to kind of consider, given how rangy he's proven this year, how switchable on defense he's proven, the job he's done against some power threes in the Paul George, Carmelo Anthony mold, would it be wrong to almost consider, with how small the Heat play, you know what, Patrick Patterson is essentially, a big wing at the 4 in this series too, like for the purposes of like trying to match it up in your head and how the two teams are going to play?
I think that's fine, and I think that effectively that's what Patrick Patterson does. He is a big wing. But,
I mean, it's pedantic anyway. There's not really a difference. I'm just curious as to your take.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's one thing if you're... The one thing Patrick Patterson is excellent at is, like, switching on pick and rolls and containing on pick and rolls and stuff like that. But if you're asking Patrick Patterson to be, like, the primary defender against Joe Johnson, it's difficult because Johnson will just run around screens. And it's hard to ask Patterson to chase around screens. He's much less comfortable doing that.
Here's the thing, though. As long as Valanciunas isn't on the floor...
Yeah.
And this isn't a mark against Valanciunas, who's going to have a huge role in this series, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. If Biyombo and Patterson are your big man combination, DeMar Carroll's on the floor, DeMar DeRozan's on the floor, even if Norman Powell's in that mix at all, the Raptors can switch everything. Because the Heat are, the Heat players 2 through 4 are kind of the same size. Even Goran Dragic is a big point guard. I think the Raptors are going to switch a lot of stuff off the ball and even on the ball a little bit. They won't switch. I don't know if they'll switch a small onto Whiteside willingly, but if they do, Biyombo can handle some of these wings a little bit, and Whiteside's not exactly, like a great back down threat or anything like that. I mean, he may have improved down the stretch, but I still don't think you'd worry too much. Against Kyle Lowry, sure, but Lowry could just front the post and poke the ball free, but I don't think you worry about a temporary mismatch if Whiteside's got the ball. I think any case where Whiteside's shooting the ball outside of the restricted area is a win.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think the Raptors can switch a lot of those actions. I agree, and I think the Heat actually mostly do most of their damage from inside the arc. So it's very important to contain dribble penetration, especially against the likes of Goran Dragic and against the likes of Dwayne Wade, and even against Joe Johnson. He's very good at, as we know, like getting off the high pick and roll, and then putting the defender on his back, and then forcing the big to come up, and then containing other stuff. So it's important to really contain dribble penetration, and if you need to switch to do so, then I think that more or less the Heat have so many interchangeable sort of perimeter players that the Raptors should be able to switch those, so long as they have the right lineup on the floor. Like you said, just as long as Jonas is not at the 3-point line, I think the Raptors are good.
Yeah, that's and you mentioned the rebounding. And Whiteside's good in that regard. Let's talk about the big men for a second. Are you cool talking about how the Raptors are going to defend the Heat? Do you want to shift to big men, or is there more you want to say about those kind of 3-wing versus 3-wing matchups?
No. I think the Raptors just need to keep size on the floor. That's a bit weird, and I know, like normally I would be all for downsizing and going small, but it's one thing to go small against the Pacers when they have small players, but the Heat's wings are actually quite big.
So do you think this is not a great Corey Joseph series then, even though he just turned in a phenomenal series against the Pacers?
I guess we'll talk about this more on the Raptors offense sort of perspective, but so long as you can get Hassan Whiteside off the court, there's not a lot of rim protection there for Miami. So I think the Raptors are actually going to be even guys like Corey Joseph, they might give up a little bit of something on defense, which is weird to say about Joseph, but he will provide a lot on offense based on how he can drive the ball.
Okay, you mentioned getting Hassan Whiteside off the damn floor.
Mm-hmm.
Hassan Whiteside, in terms of how the Raptors are going to score, is, he's a good counter to what the Raptors like to do. He blocked 9.7% of opponent 2-point field goals while he was on the floor this season, which was the highest in the league. It's a ridiculous mark. It worked out to 3.7 blocks per game. Early in the year, it looked like statistically some of those blocks were coming at the expense of the team's defense. He was making all these blocks without having a positive impact on the Heat's bottom line. That kind of changed as the season went along. The Heat wound up, 0.9 points per 100 possessions, worse defensively with Whiteside on the court, but that's essentially a rounding error when it comes to lineup data. They were better with him on the floor overall, and I think if you were to, I didn't do it ahead of time, I should have, if you were to split this into season parts, I think you'd notice a positive on the defensive end later in the year for Whiteside as he kind of figured out how to get these blocks within the concept of the defense. The Raptors drive more than almost any other team with DeRozan and Lowry. That's something that was an issue against Indiana with the high hedging against the Lowry pick and rolls and Paul George locking DeRozan down. It's going to be an issue again in this series because DeRozan's going to face tough defenders, which we'll talk about, and Whiteside's going to be at the rim. There's not a lot you can do if Kyle Lowry's shot isn't dropping to get Whiteside out of the paint. The Heat are going to drop back against the pick and roll. They're going to make Valanciunas beat them on pick and pops. They're going to make Patterson beat them on pick and pops. They're going to they're not going to let the Raptors into the paint willingly. So, I guess then, does the biggest factor in the series, at least as it pertains to the paint, come down to Jonas Valanciunas drawing enough fouls on Hassan Whiteside to limit Whiteside to, say, 20-25 minutes a game instead of the 30 he's been playing?
Well, I think the biggest advantage here is that Eric Spoelstra doesn't fully trust Whiteside, and it's pretty clear based on how the season has gone. Whiteside
You don't think that changed as the year went on?
I think it improved as the year went on, sure, but I think there were still times where, for example, one thing really stood out to me. Late in the season, Hassan Whiteside got an offensive rebound and passed and kicked it out instead of trying to shoot. And the one thing is Hassan Whiteside's like a black hole on offense. He never passes. And because he actually passed out of after getting an offensive rebound, Eric Spoelstra actually called timeout just to congratulate him on doing so. It's that kind of situation with him. So it's not to say that Spoelstra dislikes Hassan Whiteside or anything, but Spoelstra plays it careful with Whiteside. So if you can get Whiteside into foul trouble, or if you can exploit him in space, there's an opportunity there to basically force Spoelstra's hand. That's usually the moments where he starts to pull Whiteside, is when Whiteside is reluctant to get out to the perimeter, hedge, and instead he's camping out the paint. But like you said, man, if Lowry's three-point shot isn't working, it's hard to bait him to come out of the paint for any reason. And it's hard to fault anyone for not coming out of the paint, especially even when Lowry's shooting 12% from deep. So, yeah, it would be tricky. I think the easiest way might be to just go to Jonas in the post and go against Whiteside in that scenario. And while that's a risky strategy, I don't mind going to it the first 6 minutes of the game. Jonas has actually scored pretty well against Whiteside this year. So, yeah, I think it's just key, because once you take Whiteside off the court, there's not a lot of rim protection there for the Heat, and that really opens up the Raptors' drive game.
Definitely. And so I think that's key. I think you'll see them. I mean, the Raptors have done a good job generally looking for Jonas early. I thought they got a little uncreative in doing so later in the Indiana series, where it was just kind of clear out dump-ins. I think they're, those improvised post-ups that they do for him off the dive or off, after he sets a screen for a baseline cutter. Those are the ways to get him deep position against Whiteside. The nice thing, too, is that all of those dump-offs that, if the Raptors can get into the paint at all those dump-offs that Valanciunas subsists on, Whiteside's jumping for the block. Even though he's been better in terms of defensive fundamentals and playing sound within the scheme, he'll jump at a guy at the rim and leave those little lanes for Lowry or Joseph dump-offs. We have to switch back to the defensive focus just for 1 second.
And I think those are the times where if you can make Whiteside make an early help rotation that's the wrong one, where he's gambling for the block, those are the situations that will, again, really frustrate Eric Spoelstra and convince him to pull him off the court, which is... I don't know. I think Spoelstra will eventually realize over the course of a 7-game series the importance of having Whiteside guard the rim. So I think that this only really lasts 2-3 games maybe, and then he'll realize, okay, I need Whiteside's rim protection in there at all times, as much as possible. But at least early on, I mean, if there are ways to bait Whiteside and get sort of guards driving to the hoop, force him to rotate and then dump off to Jonas, I think that's a very effective way to attack the defense as well.
Okay. So Valanciunas and Biyombo against Hassan Whiteside. It's a really fun matchup. Valanciunas and Biyombo had such a huge series against the Pacers as a duo. Can they win the rebounding edge and the edge for garbage points around the basket against Whiteside? Not to make it sound like Whiteside is a superstar or anything, but he averaged 14 points on 60% shooting and grabbed over 3 offensive rebounds a game. Valanciunas and Biyombo are maybe the best offensive rebounding pair of big men in basketball. Valanciunas finishes great around the rim. Biyombo's a big foul drawer off of offensive rebounds, which is maybe a way to get Whiteside to pick up an extra one. Do the Raptors have the overall edge at center?
I mean, I think so, because there's absolutely no depth behind Whiteside in terms of centers.
Who are you to doubt Udonis?
Yeah, you done with your career, Ms. Haslam.
Veteran presence, yo.
Yeah, their version of Louis Scola, a very tough Louis Scola. No, I mean, look, they have nothing. They have no the part that I'm looking at is just rim protection. I think that's going to be very important in the series. And I think that's also ultimately one of the things that doomed the Hornets, since it just didn't have enough rim protection. But even in the Hornets series, you were able to see ways in terms of how Steve Clifford positioned Cody Zeller and things like this, where they were able to actually solve Hassan Whiteside a little bit. And so, I don't know. I mean, Steve Clifford, I think, is a more technically sound and savvy coach than Dwayne Casey is, and he's a bit quicker on those things. But
their guards were also shooting much better than the Raptors guards are shooting right now, which is important because the Heat I think after Game 4, the Heat kind of shifted their pick and roll strategy a little bit, and Whiteside was coming up a little more in the pick and roll. Maybe the Heat do that against the Raptors too, though, because Indiana had a lot of success hedging high against that Lowry Valanciunas pick and roll instead of letting Valanciunas get kind of ahead of steam and Lowry throw a lob in. So maybe the Heat will, look at what the Pacers did and stretch their own defense out a little bit, and maybe the Raptors can pull Whiteside away from the rim that way. I don't think they'll start that way, not with Lowry shooting the way he is at least, but we'll see. That could be an edge. It would be nice if, Whiteside, even if he's not in foul trouble, if he has to have it on his mind a little bit for chunks of the game, and maybe he's a little less eager. Because I do think Lowry can get to the rim on Goran Dragic. Whether DeRozan can is something we'll find out. But I think Lowry and even Corey Joseph, they can get to the rim on Dragic. Dragic is long and he tries hard, but he's not a particularly good defender, and he's not particularly swift. Josh Richardson will see some time off the bench. We'll talk about him in a bit. But I think the Raptors can get to the rim. So to your point, if they can get that rim protection out of there, that could be huge.
Yeah, for sure. Let's segue into talking how the Raptors can actually attack this team. I think we have to switch back to the defensive side just for 1 second, because James Johnson just posted a photo on Instagram of the Heat logo frozen over. Oh no.
It's great. There are icicles dripping from the rim and stuff. And he just says, hello. So this is a question that we almost have to address because of what happened 2 years ago and then what happened last year. Joe Johnson is on the floor for the Heat. They also employ Dwayne Wade. Rotations are shorter in the playoffs. James Johnson didn't see the floor really in the first round. Is there a chance that the mood becomes utilized during this series at all?
There's no chance, guys. There's no chance, okay? The Raptors were pushed to the brink in 7 games. And James Johnson only saw the floor in garbage time, I think. Unfortunately, for all the James Johnson truthers out there, I'm still seeing people saying that James Johnson would be a good matchup in the series. And you know what? He might actually be. Having a big wing against the Heat would be useful, but he's a break in case of emergency option at this point.
Yeah, that I don't think he's going to get used. But hey, he's there. He's an extra body, and it's nice to have options at least.
Yeah, well, it's a last minute option, but it's a last ditch option. Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it helps for option wise that Norman Powell had some stretches on Paul George where he looked pretty good. Maybe you're confident with him on a Dang or a Joe Johnson for stretches. I think this is with the Raptors where they're going to want to stay big-ish. But they're only going to play one power forward, and Carroll's, I think, essentially going to be the backup power forward. That's actually a rotation tweet. I didn't mind the Raptors' rotations in Game 7, but I think they'd be better served breaking up Patterson and Carroll at the end of the first and the end of the third, because I think one of those guys should effectively be the backup power forward in this series. So if you can get one of them a hook early and kind of give them the same rest overlap that kind of DeRozan and Lowry do, where one of them sits at a time, I think that might be a better way to approach them instead of playing 12 minutes of the first together. But I think this could be a big Norman Powell series. Do you see Powell factoring in?
I always see Norman Powell factoring in. I don't think I doubt Norman Powell anymore. He was, as far as Game 7 goes, he was one of the Raptors' best players in Game 7. So many key, crucial plays, man. That steal against Paul George was just kind of like ripped it.
That was awesome.
And
all the threes.
Yep, all of the threes. And then sprinting out in transition and then forcing the defense to collapse and then finding Lowry for a layup, like a duck-in layup in the fourth quarter. Those are all huge. Norman Powell played in a huge role.
Dude, they ran an out-of-timeout play for him.
Yeah.
in Game 7 of a playoff game.
This is why I didn't want you to disrespect Norman Powell's name with Josh Richardson's name, okay? Because
Dude, okay, but this is the thing. You say that, but Norman Powell may not be the best rookie in the series. He may not be the best second-round pick in the series. He may not be the best D-leaguer in the series. Dude, okay, look, I love Norman Powell, and Norman Powell has had more of an impact than Josh Richardson has had. Josh Richardson is also awesome. Josh Richardson was the number 40 overall pick. For those who don't know, he was, when Norman Powell had his big surge in March, but it started just a little too late, he didn't get Player of the Month because Josh Richardson was going absolutely insane. Richardson finished the year with 52 games played, and in 21 minutes, averaged 6.6 points, hit 46% of his threes, and was a terrific defender. He can kind of guard three positions. I think the Heat will want him guarding the smaller Raptors, whether it's Lowry and Joseph or a Powell. I don't know if he draws the DeRozan assignment, but he's certainly long enough to. Josh Richardson, man, another D-League success story, another second-round find in this series. The Richardson-Powell matchup, I don't think they're going to guard each other much because it would be a poor use of the defensive chops of each to put them on lower usage players. But, man, this is a fun little wrinkle to this series. And, yeah, I'm going full D-League geek right now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you know what, I have to give props to Josh Richardson. He's really been another one of those players that's kind of turned around the Heat season, so credit to Josh, but, yeah, Norm, I think Norm is like an effective defender against Dwayne Wade, actually. Just because
I think so, too.
He's physically similar to Dwayne Wade in that he's a bit shorter. He's a 6'4", 6'5", but he has that extremely long wingspan. And so long as Norm doesn't fall for Dwayne Wade's crafty up fakes and stuff, and it is not easy to not fall to resist, because Dwayne Wade is a very, very crafty scorer, as we all know. But if Norman Powell can avoid foul trouble and avoid jumping at Dwayne Wade's slow jumpers and up fakes, I think that Norm will be a great guy for that. And also, I mean, you could even put Norm on somebody like Luol Deng. If Luol Deng's posting up, it's not the worst thing in the world. Plus, I think Norm has been shown an ability to guard some post-ups. I mean, Paul George repeatedly tried to post up Norm.
He's great in ball denial, which is huge.
Yeah, exactly. The long arms, that's how he gets a lot of his steals. Is just that they think that the defender thinks that they have Norm sealed. All of a sudden, his 7-foot arms are just reaching around and getting that steal. He's also been great at just staying low to the body. I mean, I think it's one of the things that Brent Barry actually mentioned on yesterday's broadcast. He was talking about Norm Powell's defense, and it's just Norm Powell gets really low. He really centers himself to the defender, and it's hard to move him, even though he's a more slightly built guy. I think the only one guy you can't really keep Norm Powell on is Joe Johnson, just because Joe Johnson is crafty enough around the pick and roll. He's going to put Norm Powell on his back. You know how Joe Johnson is with that annoying pick and roll stance. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, I can see a big role for Norm in the series, but I mean, it's at a certain point you're running out of options. Plus, what are we doing with Terrence Ross?
Yeah, I don't. So this is the thing. This is this is not an elephant in the room, I don't think. But look, Dwayne Casey, since he put Patterson in the starting rotation, which was the right decision in the Indiana series, that has caused a trickle down as Casey tries to manage his new rotations. Because Patterson was a big part of the second unit. Also, a factor that DeMar Carroll moved back into the starting unit, so Norman Powell moved to the second group. I think after what we saw in Game 7, Casey gave Ross a lot of chances to bounce back in that Indiana series. You have to think Powell has jumped Ross in the rotation, and if Casey's going to keep it tight to 8 guys, which I still think Ross sees minutes as the 9th man, because the Raptors are going to need shooting in this series, and they're going to need the extra wings. But I think Powell has to have jumped Ross now, right?
I mean, he has to, and I think he has.
He was off the bench first in Game 7. He played significantly more.
Yeah, but also I think Powell. Just one caveat is that basically any minutes that DeMar Carroll sat, it was Powell's turn to guard George, and George was on the court at all times. So there was no role for Ross to play in that scenario because you needed somebody to guard George. But
it's not like Ross is going to have anywhere to hide in this. Ross might be okay chasing Dwayne Wade for small stretches because as disengaged as he is sometimes and as sleepy as he gets on the backdoor cuts, he's pretty adept at fighting through screens and sticking with guys when he's engaged. The issue is that you have to roll the dice to see if he's engaged or not, game to game.
Yeah. And that's really sucks because Russ's 3-point shooting is like a nice weapon, and it really helps open up the court, especially when Biyombo's on the floor, and that's a large part of. Rouse was a huge part of why the bench units were so successful this season in the regular season, but he's just continues to lay an egg in the playoffs. It's you can tell the increase in physicality really gets to Russ, really bumps him off his spots, both on offense and defense. So I don't know, man. You stick with Norm, especially when Norm is shooting this well. Like there's almost no area in which he's worse than Ross at.
Okay, I mean he shot 31.6% on threes in the series.
Really?
Let's not say he was like lights out. And look, I have a piece coming for Sportsnet on Tuesday about how Norman Powell developed his 3-point shot from a weakness into maybe not a strength, but at least not a weakness anymore. So look for that. But 31.9%, Will.
Damn. Well, I guess I have Game 7 too fresh in my mind, man. Those 3 corner threes were really huge.
They were huge. And sorry, 31.6%. I said 31.9 as I was muting the mic to sneeze. Okay, so that's a lot about the defense and the potential rotations. You wanted to talk about, and we obviously have to talk about, how the Raptors might attack the Heat. We got into it a little bit in talking about how Whiteside factors in, but how do you see the Raptors approaching, if not the DeRozan and Lowry matchups, just their overall offensive approach to solving the Heat, who were, again, not the best defensive team. They're a little conservative. They don't force a lot of turnovers, but they also don't send teams to the line, and they do pretty well on their own glass. So they do kind of the simple conservative things that a good defense has to do to not give an opponent extra chances. They were, what did they rank? 7th in the league in defensive efficiency overall. So that's, they're pretty good. They're not the Pacers, but the Raptors aren't going to have, they're certainly not going to have it easy.
No, but I think one thing we saw from the first round is the Hornets are not really a great driving team. They have some good driving players, but it's mostly just two tiny guards. But yeah, the Hornets were able to have a lot of success driving against the Heat's defense. The Hornets ranked 3rd in the league in drives per game in the playoffs, and they scored on 73.5% of their drives. So that's huge, and I think it speaks to the Heat sort of their inability to to protect the basket when Whiteside's not in. So I think it's huge because obviously driving is the crux of the Raptors offense is so that DeRozan, Kyle Lowry, Corey Joseph can beat their man, go into the heart of the defense, and either shoot against a rotating defense or kick it out to open shooters, and then they can fire threes. So I think in this series, it fits nicely because I think most of the Heat's defense is marketed towards swarming, preventing 3-pointers, not fouling, things like that, and that's fine. And they have a great defense. Don't get me wrong. Like you said, they're top 10 in the season despite all their injuries. But I think there's an opportunity here to drive on the Heat's defense, and if you can do that, and if you get to the rim and there's no rim protection, I think the Raptors can feast in that area. That's
a big if, though. If there's no rim protection. So say Whiteside manages to stay on the floor and they're dropping back against the pick and roll. What do the Raptors go to next? Because they never really solved in the entire series. They never really figured out how to score on Indiana once they started stretching out their defense and snuffing that initial high pick and roll. Obviously, some of that was Paul George and George Hill and just the great job individuals did around the floor. But say the Raptors, it's not as easy as getting Whiteside in foul trouble or pulling him out of the paint, and the Heat are sealing off that rim well, and Lowry is still shooting poorly, and DeRozan, I think DeRozan will have a better series, but I don't think he's going to be putting up his season numbers against this crew of wing defenders. What do the Raptors have to add, or what do they have to find that they couldn't find in the Indiana series? Because you're not going to be able to score fewer than 100 points per 100 possessions against the Heat, I don't think, and win this series.
No, that's a good question. And I don't think there's an obvious answer. I think involving JV is important, but I don't know. It goes both ways too, right? Because look, if JV's off the court because of foul trouble or something, and all of a sudden you have Biyombo in, then the Heat have almost no reason to take Whiteside off the court. Because you can just have one guy sit at the rim at all times. Now, granted, you could do the same thing on the other end, but at least Whiteside is capable around the basket, very capable around the basket, as compared to Biyombo. So, I think if the Heat's defenders do a really great job of pressuring the Raptors and sort of icing these pick and rolls, I think it's on the onus is on the guards to consistently be able to, I don't know, just be willing to pass when they to trust the pass, as Dwayne Casey says so often. Trust the pass, man. Jonas has been, very good when he's got the ball in the playoffs, and he's done a better job of making himself open. And I think that Jonas, if Jonas is a certified option, and if there's enough shooting on the court around like a DeRozan Jonas pick and roll, I think that could be very effective. But I don't know, man. The Heat have good perimeter defenders too. It's not like it's gonna be super easy to penetrate their defense either. So yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know.
Okay, so let's talk DeRozan specific. Actually, let's. I know we're saying a lot of I don't know, but really, is it? It's too hard to say much specific because there are a couple big question marks looming over the Raptors, and one is, will they play better? Because they didn't play very well against the Pacers, and that's a very broad and non-specific question. But the bigger one, especially in terms of like what their offense can do, because it's going to dictate how Miami defends them, is like can they score enough in this series to win if Kyle Lowry shoots under 40% again? Like let's just put it down to that, because Lowry hasn't shot well for a couple of months now. Something looks up, whether it's the elbow injury or some sort of confidence or mechanical issue that came from the elbow injury. If Lowry doesn't shoot, say, 40% and 33% on threes, I'm throwing random numbers out there, they're not magic numbers or anything. If he shoots poorly again, are the Raptors going to score enough to win this series? No matter what they do in the post or what Indy does schematically or what the Raptors do on defense, can they win this series with Lowry shooting poorly again?
Man, that's a very hard question to answer, but I don't
because I think the answer is no, and that sucks.
Yeah, because Lowry has like two options, two primary ways in terms of which he scores. It's sort of like obviously the 3-point shot is huge for him, whether it's a pull up around a high screen or it's a catch and shoot where he's the off guard. Those are very deadly, and that's his number one option. And that's why he was one of the best 3-point shooters in the league during the regular season. But like you said, man, the elbow is beyond. His jumper is very ugly right now, and it's not totally unexplained as to why he shot such a poor percentage. It really does look like his elbow is like just completely mangled, and there's no rest at all. So I don't know. I don't think that's going to magically heal itself. So then the other option is Lowry gets to the basket, and it's okay to get to it's easier to get to the basket when there's no rim protection. But again, it comes back to rim protection. If Hassan Whiteside's there, man, Kyle Lowry's not scoring Hassan Whiteside at the basket. It doesn't really matter. So yeah, man, if Lowry can shoot effectively, the only hope is that Lowry does what he did in games 5, 6, and 7 against the Indiana Pacers, where he was able to drive, collapse the defense, and then use himself as a decoy to open up shots for others. And I thought that Lowry's assist numbers really, shown that. He went to this like pseudo Ricky Rubio sort of mold where he only scored layups and played good defense and just made a lot of great passes. But without Lowry's scoring itself, it's going to be very, very difficult. So again, it circles back to rim protection. As if you can open up the rim, then you get Lowry to get some points there. It's not so bad. It's a little bit more tolerable.
DeMar Carroll talked about after Game 7 about how this series against the Indiana Pacers showed that everyone was dependent on it. Everyone was relied on. DeRozan and Lowry didn't have the best series, but Carroll and Corey Joseph come from programs where that was what those teams did in the playoffs. The Atlanta Hawks, last year as they went to the Eastern Conference Finals, there was a series where Jeff Teague struggled. There was a series where Paul Millsap struggled. And guys like Carroll and Korver and a few others had to step up. Corey Joseph comes from San Antonio, where every night, a different guy can step up. Those guys are obviously huge. It might be a different guy every night, and it might be that the Raptors just trust their depth and their kind of collective if Lowry's shot isn't dropping or DeRozan doesn't have it that night. But do you see a guy, we've talked a lot about Valanciunas, so my guess is that Valanciunas is your answer. Who is that guy that has to step up as the number 3 in this series, especially if Lowry and DeRozan don't have it all the way?
Yeah, it's undoubtedly JV. I think that the Raptors... I think defensively, the Raptors are going to be okay against the Heat, but it's the Raptors' offense, which was once a great backbone of what the Raptors do, because of Lowry's elbow and everything. The Raptors need more scoring, and they need it out of JV because he's the one that's most capable of doing it. Um, so I say JV is like by far the most important player outside of the star players in the series. And then now Corey Joseph could be very good too. I think if Corey Joseph is able to effectively defend Dwayne Wade, then you can have your two guard lineups where Wade is guarded by Joseph, and you got Lowry on Dragic. And I'm pretty confident that Corey Joseph can still get his offense. I mean, he's the one player that's looked the most consistent for the Raptors throughout the playoffs. If you want to chalk it up to playoff experience, then go for it. But he's been a very steady presence, and I think that I don't know. I don't think that will change in the second round.
Okay, let's talk DeRozan. I agree. Corey Joseph is big, and also when Lowry, you mentioned Lowry getting into the teeth of the defense and creating for others. When his shot isn't there necessarily, Joseph as a secondary ball handler is huge because he can make that swing pass. Lowry can kick it out, and Joseph can attack right into another pick and roll or to break down the defense at the second level. So those two playing together was, statistically, just the two of them with DeRozan wasn't, looking at the lineup data, wasn't all that inspiring. And Joseph for the series had a negative plus minus, but I think that just goes to show you that those things are descriptive and not necessarily, great encapsulations of what happened in the series, because I thought Joseph was terrific in the Pacers series. And he'll be big again as if Lowry struggles. If Lowry doesn't, then sure, Joseph could take a step back, I guess. But he's big, and he has the playoff experience. He has the two-way play. Just doesn't have the size. So it'll be interesting to see how the Raptors approach that, and whether Josh Richardson is the guy that they stick the extra point guard on when Richardson's out there. Because Winslow's a poor shooter, and I want to talk about Winslow because I want to talk about who's going to guard DeRozan and how he might attack that. Winslow got kind of an unfair rap, I thought, this year for being a bad offensive player, which he's not, I don't think. He's a poor shooter, but I don't think he's a bad offensive player overall. And I don't think, the Hornets kind of gave him the Tony Allen treatment at times in that series from outside the arc. He shot just 27.6% on threes, and I think the Raptors can get away with that too, helping off of Winslow, whether it's in the corner or the weak wing. But overall, I'm not sure you'd want to hide... I'm not sure he's a hiding spot for long stretches if he's going to be moving off the ball. Where do you see... Let's talk about Winslow's offense first. Do you see him getting anything in this series, or are the Raptors going to pretty much, if Winslow's beating you, then that's something they take?
I think that's something you take, honestly. Winslow's offense actually reminds me a lot of James Johnson type offense. Like, he'll dribble drive towards the basket if he needs to make a move, but most of the time he'll just stay in the corner, pretend to be a three-point shooter, and then occasionally cut.
1.5 assists as a wing as a rookie. That's good stuff.
That's more than Terrence Ross will ever get. But yeah, look, I mean, if Winslow's killing you, you kind of live with that, honestly, because there's a lot more priorities on defense for the Raptors than stopping Winslow. And I don't know. As long as you're diligent with him, you can liberally help off of him. But it's just, obviously, if you help off the guy, then you have to know where he is at all times, so that in case if he does back cut or something like that, you have time to react and you can stop him from doing so. But I don't know. I'm much more concerned about Winslow's defense on DeRozan. I mean, Winslow is very good defensively, very, very good defensively.
Yeah. So where does DeRozan land in this series? Because he faced Paul George in the last series. And Paul George, outside of Kawhi Leonard, may be the best equipped player in the NBA to guard DeMar DeRozan. But when Paul George hit the bench, it was Solomon Hill or CJ Miles or someone like that. When Luol Deng hits the bench, it's Justice Winslow. When Justice Winslow hits the bench, it's probably Luol Deng. It could be Josh Richardson too. DeRozan's not going to get a breather. Casey can't massage DeRozan's minutes to get him easier matchups in this series. How, DeRozan hasn't struggled with... fast guys or super athletic guys nearly as much as he struggled with length, and that was an issue that George caused him because George is obscenely long. How does DeRozan attack Winslow and Deng and whoever else might defend him in this series? Are they playing it straight up like they did in the regular season to get DeRozan his offense, or are they coming at this from a different angle?
No, I think they'll play it pretty straight up. I don't think that I think their first option will be to just try to ice the pick and roll, force DeRozan towards the baseline, encourage him to take the mid-range jumper, and try to keep someone at the basket so that DeRozan will have an easy time finishing. But I don't think that strategy will be as effective as sort of the way the Pacers executed it, because I think DeRozan is going to be able to get 1 or 2 steps around his defender at first. And if he has some downhill momentum, I think he's still going to be able to finish at the rim, even when Whiteside is around. I mean, DeRozan isn't just like a finish at the basket guy. He's got a couple push shots, floaters, pull up, mid-range stuff that he's become very adept towards. And I think he could actually hurt the Heat in that sense. So I think if he's going off a lot, if he's really going off, then they'll probably blitz him and stuff. But I think their first approach
I have something to throw at you,
okay.
which, it's hard to extrapolate regular season results because rotations are different, rosters are different, coaches are keeping things in the bag or just trying to stick to their 82-game plan instead of adjusting game by game. This season, DeMar DeRozan played more minutes and scored more points against the Miami Heat than any other opponent. In 4 games, he averaged 29.3 points with a 35.6% usage rate and a 58.7 true shooting percentage. He also grabbed 5.3 rebounds and dished 4.5 assists. If you're looking at his overall impact, I think he played better against the Heat than maybe any other team throughout the course of the regular season, except maybe the pair of games against Denver, where he really went off. And that's just off the top of my head, the Denver one. DeRozan was obviously had a lot of great games in the season, and the teams they played twice will have some great series in there. But 117 points in 154 minutes over 4 games against the Heat, shot nearly 50% from the floor, took 40 free throw attempts in those 4 games. Does that give you confidence at all, or do you throw all of that out because the Heat are so different now than they were then? Does that matter to you at all that DeRozan really had success against the Heat in the regular season?
I mean, you got to throw away some of that. Like, I went to one of the games where DeRozan went off for like 35 points and hit 4 3-pointers.
Humble brag.
Yeah, I went to that game.
Was that the Saturday night one in March? The overtime one?
No, it didn't go to overtime. It was a blowout.
Okay.
But yeah, DeRozan just absolutely killed them in that game. It was actually really fun. But that was the game where the Heat had like 6 players.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, you had to throw out a lot of the in-season stuff against the Heat. But I mean, I don't know. The only one thing is that the Heat do have bigger wings. And so it's a matter of, can DeRozan use his quickness to beat those bigger wings, because he won't be able to do his post-up stuff. And I thought DeMar DeRozan, he's not always going to be guarded by one guy. And I think if he gets to the small defender, he will try to back him up and do his stuff. Although it's actually been quite annoying recently, where every time DeRozan gets to a smaller defender, he always backs him up instead of and then takes 8-9 dribbles and then takes the pull-up. That's not a great post-up possession, regardless.
It's not a post-up, really. It's just it's just
an
ISO with your back to the guy.
Yeah, and I was very annoying. Every time he got George Hill in a switch, or even Monte Ellis, he would...
Oh, the worst. There was one possession in, I think, the second quarter where he was trapped on the right baseline, and he waved off a Valanciunas screen, and then dribbled out the clock and took a brutal fadeaway.
Yep. Yeah, DeRozan does... you gotta live and die with DeRozan. And at least in Game 7, he scored 30 points.
Empty the clip.
He emptied the clip, man. The clip was DeRozan's 6 of 24 Kobe game.
Man, and now he's reloaded for Tuesday night.
Who's excited for that? But I mean,
oh yeah, he's gonna come onto the court. It just I'm reloaded, and just firing from the opening tip.
But I mean, I don't know. I think in this series, I'm actually quite optimistic that DeRozan can make a huge offensive impact. In a positive way. Yeah, because I think that if he's able to get separation from his man, which he just wasn't able to do ever against the Pacers, they're going to have the big drop back. And I think if DeRozan's got a head of steam going towards the basket, I think he can get some fouls on Hassan Whiteside. And if you can do that, then that opens up the offense for everyone else. So, again, I mean, I don't know. That's my one point, I guess, that keeps coming back to. Just make sure the Heat have no rim protection and the Raptors can score. Because it's not like the Raptors are going to have a lot of shooting out there ever at this point. Unless Patrick Patterson is hot again. Who, by the way, Patrick Patterson was amazing in Game 7. Those threes.
Yeah, and he shot 41.7% for the series.
From deep?
Yeah.
That's money, man.
And I thought they kind of underutilized them. I thought in Games 5 and 6, they didn't really get the full value of having Patterson at the 4. They really didn't put Miles Turner in the pick and pop much. That's going to be less of an issue for Miami anyway, unless they strangely go to two bigs with McRoberts at the 4. And McRoberts looks like a shell anyway right now. So
it's so sad to look at McBob.
Yeah, he was awesome for a little while there, doing that Charlie work, that Charlie Day looking Josh McRoberts.
Oh, that Charlie. Okay. Does look like
Yes,
Charlie Day.
that Charlie. Okay. What else we've covered a lot of different angles of this matchup.
Is it time for us to give our predictions?
No, I got one more for you.
Okay.
Eric Spoelstra
Ooh.
is a very good coach.
Yes.
Right? Pretty smart with the in-game adjustment. I mean, I know he gets some criticism for his rotations at time, but he's a video nut. He started out as a video guy. I'd imagine he's going to have some creative X's and O's stuff. The Heat are pretty set with their rotation, I think. I don't see Gerald Green fighting his way in. Maybe Tyler Johnson,
no.
If he's healthy, gets back to the fringe of the rotation. But I don't think so. I think it's a 7-man, and then whichever extra big he trusts the most at that time. Whereas Casey's still juggling 10 guys, maybe 9 guys, and his rotations could be a little more fluid, which is great for flexibility and versatility, but also maybe less great in terms of hitting the ground running and having a set way you want to play. Do you see how big a factor in this series do you think the coaching battle between Casey and Spoelstra was? Because I thought the Casey Vogel battle in round 1 was pretty fun, and Casey, he was a little slow at times, but I thought for the most part he acquitted himself pretty well against Vogel, who's a great coach. And by the way, the fact that Indiana hasn't extended him yet is bananas. They should get that locked up immediately. But Casey Spoelstra, does that matchup move the needle much for you? Does it worry you at all? Do you think that's, did Casey show you enough in round 1 to make you a little more comfortable with it?
Yeah, I thought so. I mean, as a very petty writer and fan, I took some shots at Dwayne Casey, especially when he was slow to make some adjustments. But I think overall, I think Dwayne Casey actually either coached Vogel to an even, or he actually bested Vogel. I mean, you saw a lot of Vogel's moves actually cost the Pacers a lot of, opportunities.
Ty Lawson!
Dude, all of Ty Lawson's minutes were redundant. Game 5, basically going to that all-bench lineup, that allowed the Raptors to make the comeback. Without that, the Raptors are done in 6 games. There's a lot of, there's opportunities missed from Vogel's end. Whatever. Vogel's a good coach. They should re-sign Vogel. It's not a problem. But
and if they don't, someone will.
Oh, people are chomping at the bit for coaches right now. I mean, in this series against the Heat, I think, I don't know, I think Spoelstra has more, I think he's operating with more talent, even though his team won less games. He has more talent and he has more options at his disposal. But I think where Dwayne Casey actually operates best is reacting to the opponents, as opposed to coming in with a dominant game plan off the start. And I don't know. I think that sometimes that works in the Raptors' favor. So,
do you think that's an edge then, that maybe they drop game 1, maybe they come out there, they drop game 1 because Casey hasn't been proactive about it or whatever. But the Heat don't have many counters. If the Raptors kind of counter and figure out the Heat don't have a lot of different ways to play, and they don't have a lot of different personnel to throw in there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't really actually see a Raptors unit out there that's going to be completely dominant against this Heat team. I think there's just too many.
What is their best 5-man unit in this series? Is it the starting lineup?
The Heat?
No, the Raptors.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it depends. If Jonas is really holding his own on the defensive glass, I think you can afford to lose Patterson for Norm Powell to come in as the 2 or the 3. But yeah, approximately that. I mean, and depending on how Kyle Lowry looks, maybe Corey Joseph instead of him, which is so sad to say, man. Because I do think that putting some size on the wing is going to be huge, and Corey Joseph is a bit bigger than Lowry.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
I don't think Lowry is going to be off the floor much.
No,
even if he's
won't.
Shooting poorly. He averaged 38.6 minutes in the first round.
Oh, so just a little bit more.
Is that the best series someone has ever turned in, shooting 31%?
I mean, effectively, yeah. He was huge on defense, man. He was absolutely huge on defense.
And he averaged 7.5 assists.
Yeah, because he morphed into a playmaker. which, I mean, obviously he's a point guard. He's supposed to be passing and stuff, but I thought the two baskets Raptors got over the final 7 minutes of Game 7, which, I mean, God, what an awful executed fourth quarter. But
the fewest fourth quarter points ever for a team that closed out a Game 7.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the two baskets the Raptors had, the last two, were Lowry just like he's completely reckless in when he goes to the hoop. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like, that's the only way he can really get there is if he, like, jumps out from way farther so the defender is, like, a step behind and then able to beat the big. And he's just, like, crumpling to the floor. Both times, those layups, man. Just go back and look at Game 7. He absolutely wrecked his body in Game 7 trying to get that win. And I think that, I don't know, man. Unless he, like, I don't think he can wreck his body any more than it currently is because the elbow is really screwing up his jump shot. But
we think
he has other things. Yeah, well, we do think. Yeah, you're right. We're speculating, but yeah, I mean, he's still able to make contributions otherwise, which is great.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier how plus minus isn't the greatest teller, but I mean, it says something that Lowry had the second best plus minus on the team in raw totals for that series, and he shot 31.6% from the floor.
Yep.
That's
Lowry over
and
everything.
DeRozan meanwhile shot 31.9% and had the worst plus minus on the team.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a second end of the floor that maybe there's that explains that.
I don't know why DeRozan's actually been so bad defensively. It's very annoying.
Actually, I thought he had a couple, like, I didn't think he had a terrible Game 4.
Okay.
Or Game 7, sorry.
Okay. He had a couple of, like, nice. He's gotten better at helping on pick and roll.
And he averaged almost 2 steals for the series,
which is huge.
Yeah, it's and like look, sometimes they're maybe not the smartest decisions to try to steal those passes, but Lowry and DeRozan. This has nothing to do with the Heat series, but I have the numbers in front of me. Lowry shot 31.6%. DeRozan shot 31.9%. Lowry shot 16.3% on threes. DeRozan shot 16.7% on threes. They each averaged 5.6 free throw attempts per game.
That's weird.
Yeah, their numbers are very, very similar, and yet their
weird.
impact's drastically different.
Yeah. It's defense.
And they average almost the exact same number of turnovers, too. Lowry had one more turnover for the series.
Yeah. I think that's the saving grace in this series, man. There's no Paul George and there's no George Hill.
Yeah, there aren't turnovers, really.
Yeah. All right.
Which, sweet.
Prediction time.
Prediction time.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So much of it depends on Lowry.
I know.
It's quite annoying.
Okay, let's make two predictions then. One with the assumption that Lowry is relatively healthy, and then another one in which we assume that Lowry's elbow is fundamentally broken a shot right now.
That feels unfair.
Okay. Well, I mean, otherwise we're just making a guess on Lowry's health. That's not as fun as predicting the series.
Yeah. By the way, I never said my answer to what the Raptors' best 5 in this series is.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry.
I don't know if it's best 5, but I think in this podcast we've maybe understated how much we are going to see Carroll at the 4. I think it's a big Norm Powell series. We talked about it a little bit, but then we kind of got back into talking about Patterson's role and how the Raptors need to have size on the floor. I think I think Patterson is the only power forward that plays. So I think 15 minutes a game or so, the Raptors are small, which is not an insignificant amount of time.
And that's fine, as long as
I don't know if that winds up being their most effective, but
yeah, if those minutes come with Bismack Biyombo at center, I think you're fine because Bismack's such a dominant rebounder and such a great rim protector that you're okay with downsizing. Plus, the Heat downsize a lot anyway. Like you said off the top, they play 3-wing lineups almost all the time.
Yeah. Okay. So let's predict. You can go ahead first.
I've got my heart says Raptors in 7, but I think the Heat in 6.
In 6?
Yeah.
I wish I could just talk to Kyle Lowry.
I wish Lowry would answer honestly, but I also don't because if he just openly said my elbow is screwed, I think that's not an advantage. But
no,
I think it's pretty clear, right?
He should say, "Hey, my elbow's terrific. Watch me smack you with my elbow." I'm gonna sneeze again. Talk for a second.
Yeah. All right. So, like you said, man, it comes a lot down to Lowry's health, and I think if Lowry's elbow is actually healthy and if he's able to shoot like 40% on threes, maybe even just 35% on threes on like 3, 4, 5, 6 attempts a game, I think the Raptors can take this, but ultimately I think the Raptors will struggle to produce enough offense without Lowry being at his best.
Yeah, that's tough. But you know what? Did round one not teach us to be optimistic? To believe, to put our hearts on the line, Will?
To believe that a 7 seed will lose to a second seed in 7 games. It'll happen.
Now to believe that 2 seed can shut down the Armadillo Cowboy, the 7-time All-Star.
God, Joe Johnson.
Joe Johnson. Good God, Joe Johnson's terrifying.
Why is he always here? It's just like Paul Pierce.
How is he how did he go? I understand Joe Johnson isn't that old by, old veteran standards. What I don't understand is how he was able to turn the switch off for a season and a half and then just turn it right back on when he got into nice weather in Miami. Because he's been so efficient for the Heat since he got there. And he's not scoring a ton of points or anything. I think he averaged 13 once he got there in the regular season. But even in the first round of the playoffs, 11 points on 46% shooting and 44% from 3.
Yeah, I mean,
plus 3 assists a game. He's not a good defender anymore, but you can't post him up. He's a very good post defender still, and yeah, I don't know, man. Joe Johnson.
Yeah, what a find for Joe Johnson.
If I didn't love that guy, I would hate that guy.
Dude, Joe Johnson's true shooting percentage after he moved to the Heat was 60.3, man. That's James Harden level.
Oh boy.
Oh god. Yeah, he's annoying. I wish we had Joe Johnson, and not James Johnson.
Yeah, that would be a good trade.
That'd be a great trade. The Raptors should make that one.
Unfortunately, I don't think I don't think Joe Johnson would have liked to come to Toronto as much as he liked going to Miami. All right, I'm gonna stop beating around. I'm going to say Raptors in 7.
Yes, Blake.
I will say though that I have no idea because as we've talked about, so much of this comes down to Lowry. I'm not hoping for Kyle Lowry over everything when I make that prediction, but I certainly think that it needs to be, a more effective scoring Kyle Lowry than was there in round 1, with all the other Lowry stuff still there. It's a big Lowry series, which is terrifying because we just don't know. I don't it sounds like I'm copping out or that I'm being wishy-washy, but the honest truth is that Lowry is the beating heart of this team. He's the soul of this team. He's the motor. He is the avatar for everything that this team does at both ends of the floor. And if he's not 100% and we don't know it, or he can't find that jump shot, whatever's wrong with it, we don't. It's really hard to project the Raptors like that. I think DeRozan will be better. I think they're a little deeper than the Heat. I think the Raptors are in good shape in terms of how everyone outside of their 2 stars is playing. I'm betting on Lowry being a little bit better when I say Raptors in 7. If he's not, then obviously that's a different story. But I'll deal with that. I'd rather believe that Lowry's going to be better and pick the Raptors in 7 and be wrong than assume the worst. That's very analytical of me, right?
No, I think that's the best way to approach it, really.
Yeah, what else do you do? Either way, your prediction, everyone predicting this series is either going to say, this is my prediction with the caveat that I think Lowry is fine, or this is my prediction with the caveat that I believe Lowry is not fine.
Yeah.
That's how they're all going to go.
Yeah.
So, we'll see how that plays out, I guess.
I mean, yeah. Sorry, I was just distracted. I saw Eric Horn of the Oklahoman. Someone asked Kevin Durant about getting some bars on Drake's new album, Views. Not Views from the Six, just Views.
Just Views.
Yeah, and he said, I'm honored every time I get a rapper, a famous one like that, mentioning my name. So, let's start that rumor mill again. Durant to the Raptors.
Okay, here's something. This is actually actual thing. This is per Ira Winterman. I don't know if this applies in Canada. I don't think it does. But for any U.S. fans listening or anyone who's streaming the game or has a U.S. feed, holy cow, are we ever blessed for the TNT broadcast of Game 1 on Tuesday. Ian Eagle, Brent Barry, Ali LaForce.
Yes.
Ira's tweet says for Heat Hornets, but I'm sure he means Heat Raptors.
Yeah.
He also says there's no local television in the second round of the NBA playoffs, but again, I think that maybe only applies to the U.S. market. I think Sportsnet and TSN juggle the Raptors game still, but I'm not entirely sure because guess what? I wasn't watching the schedule all that closely the last time the Raptors made the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah, man, seriously. This is it's surreal, man. It's surreal. It honestly feels like we're playing with house money, even though it's just the second round.
Can confirm, TSN has game 1, Sportsnet has games 2 and 3. I don't think it's fully determined from there because game 4 is blank.
Okay.
So the Canadians will get the Canadian broadcast, but if you're streaming or you're a U.S. listener, which if you are, yo, shout out to you. Shout out to you.
Give some of those American dollars into our Patreon.
But that is a great broadcast crew.
It is. That's the same crew that called Game 7. I was streaming it.
Yeah. That's lit.
It is.
Giddy up.
It was
all right, well, any parting shots on this series?
No, man. I'm very proud of the Raptors. I think that all season I've been waiting to say that I'm very proud of this Raptors team, but I wanted to see how the first round went, and they nearly blew it, but they're here, and I can say without a doubt now that this is the best Raptors team I've ever seen. And even though they still have a couple strides left to take, hopefully a longer playoff run to make, but I'm very proud of what the Raptors have accomplished this season, and it's huge to get over that first round hump, man. It really is, because you saw it really weighed down on the team, and to get over that, and even in the circumstances and how they got over that, I think that's very significant, and we should not forget that.
Yeah, that's great. I agree completely. It's awesome that they're here, man. It's gonna be so much fun. We get 2 more weeks of this.
It's so much work for us, man. You and me. More for you than for me. I only do like the occasional podcasts and some post-game writings.
I'm actually doing even more work this round too, which is crazy considering that they play every second day, including on my birthday.
Blake, get some sleep. Also, happy birthday to Blake, man.
It's not my birthday yet.
I know, soon.
But they do play on my birthday, which is fun. That's a pretty fun way to spend a birthday if they win that game.
Well, I mean, you'll be working for like 22 of those hours of your birthday, so.
Yeah. What better way to celebrate me?
Win it for Blake, Raptors.
Than by just doing what I do all the time. Speaking of, we should end this so I can write some more preview content. All right, well.
This is fun.
We'll talk soon, man.
We will.
Enjoy round 2. Everyone, thanks for listening. Before we get to Tuesday, just take another minute and appreciate where the Raptors are and where they've come and how much garbage you, the fan, has dealt with to get to this point. And wait until tomorrow to recalibrate and look ahead to the Heat if you can. It's going to be a really fun series, I think. And the Raptors are in the second round of the playoffs. So, I mean, come on. They're in the second round. This is sweet.
This is ridiculous, man. It's so
and
great.
it's not a title. There's no banner for this. They don't make no awards for that.
They should make an award for this though, please.
Yeah, they
please make a banner for this.
Yeah,
defeated Pacers in 7.
First round winners, defeated 7 seed in Game 7, minus or outscored in series by 7 seed. Anyway,
man.
okay.
Yeah.
Let's not end this negative. The Raptors are going to beat the Heat so long as Kyle Lowry is over everything. All right, thanks so much for listening. Will, peace.
See ya.
Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. Y'all must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the numbers review. Hit the old kick drum like an alley-oop. Drop rhymes like dimes when I drive the hoop. You must tune in if you want the scoop. The Rapcast crew on the 1s and 2s.